Good morning. How's
Good
everybody
morning.
doing?
Doing
Hey,
good?
guy, we're here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is one of my favorite topics here, and I'm very passionate about conveying some specific techniques to help,
Can't
some
hear you,
team
just
leaders,
unmuted me.
agents to help out. Let me just mute everybody to get started. So, I think that the whole listing process that the industry has adopted is broken. And I think that we need a new approach. I think we need new strategies to communicate it. And I'm going to show everybody how to get access to this worksheet that I did. And I would print it out, study it, and I'm going to make improvements on it over time so you can keep the link. But you can get access to this by going to the email that you should be receiving here. Many of you, oh, that's not the email, it's here. This email that comes out to you. And you have this link here, bulletproof custom marketing proposals. So you can download this document at your leisure by going to the email invitation to today's event. Okay. And I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot today, and I'm going to just share with you some of this information. So a listing presentation, perhaps a listing appointment, we should change that to a customized marketing proposal. And a customized marketing proposal is the signature of the top 1% of agents, those who operate not as price pickers, but as market strategists. These elite professionals transcend the basics of pricing by conducting a layered analysis. They interpret historical comps, assess active competition, active competing listings, decode emerging market trends. Their goal isn't to guess a number. It is to craft a strategic price that stirs demand, invites activity, and positions the property as the market's next must-see and sold. A lot of words. Does anybody have any thoughts on that first premise?
I like it.
All right. Anything more prolific than you like?
I anxiously was anticipating this call today, Rob, because I'm in the heat of the battle on a listing that I want to get very badly. And I went there yesterday, and I swear he was out of your role-playing handbook. His is worth more because he has tiki torches he can operate from his phone. I kid you not. So we're at an impasse and I have to go back today and get it done.
So Beth,
So I'm hoping you can help me.
I want you to listen to this.
Okay.
All right. And just forget about all the frustration. Objections are gifts.
Yes, yes, yes. I agree.
Objections are gifts. Okay. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. We've been kind of taught, similar to like an appraiser, that we kind of play God and we say this is what your house is worth, and that strategy doesn't work. And Beth, I'm not surprised, because like every seller, absent a better strategy, has that same belief system, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. So for those of you who've been out with me, I actually enjoy that. Like, if there's a victory without having to have any objections or challenge, to me, it's a shallow victory at best, right?
I did this. I did the spreadsheet. I did the Rob, but I didn't have it with me yesterday. But I'm going to take it out today.
So
But I'm looking forward to how other people use it and also how to position it.
all right, so I'm gonna read a little bit more of my extensive preparation for today to add value. Okay, those top 1%ers. Okay, this is critical. They understand that knowledge without a communication strategy is merely noise. Okay, this goes back to many agents know what's happening in the market. The better agents understand it, but the elite agents can teach it. They can explain it, right? So knowing it without being able to effectively communicate it is really frustrating, right? I mean, you know what's going on, but they're not getting it. If you've been there, raise your hand. You get it, but they don't get it. Okay. It's a frustrating exercise in futility. Mastery lies not in delivering a polished listing presentation, which we've all been taught, right? Let's get a better listing presentation, but in building trust through strategic inquiry. All right, asking questions, basically what I'm saying. It means knowing your market cold, articulating your performance, with clarity. And I mean, your performance, your prior history, right? How do you compare to your competition? Many of us don't even know that. And if your prior performance is not worthy of differentiating, then make it worthy of differentiating so you can do it in the future, right? Because that's your history. That's how you compare to your competition. Guide sellers through the forces that shape outcomes. What do you think your seller believes the force that's going to determine the sales price is, Beth?
His upgrade.
Well, but he thinks it's asking a higher price is going to get him a higher sale, correct? And he's saying the upgrades justify asking a higher price, correct?
Yes, yes, he does think that. Yes.
Right. So I'm going to skip list price and does not equate to sales price, right? It's not correlated, because if it was, we would just keep going higher and higher with the list price, correct?
Right.
So if that house was worth 700 and he thinks it's worth 800, right? He thinks the strategy is let me list it at 8. Then you'd say, well, why not list it at 4 million?
Right.
And they say, oh, that's ridiculous, Beth. But we're going to talk about how to have that conversation without being offensive. Okay. It means knowing your market code, articulating your performance criteria with clarity, guiding sellers through the forces that shape outcomes. Outcome is sales price, both the positive, right, creating abundant buyer activity and demand, a buzz, a launch, an event, right, and the negative, the compounding effect of days on market, right. One of our competitors is trying to figure out a way to disguise the days on market through private listings, very strategically trying to cover up an inability to communicate the correct strategy to their clients in the onset. So if you can't communicate it, what they're trying to do is they're trying to bury days on market and then tell this client that, hey, it's not worth it, right? So one of our competitions, Beth, would then go to your seller and say, okay, well, we'll list it at that 800,000. We'll do it through our private network, right? And the private network rejected it, and they're going to say, here's the evidence that it's not worth it. I don't understand why I'd want to go through that extra step, right? If we can have effective communication, that doesn't become part of the problem. This is worth learning how to say that the list price is a strategic invitation to the market. The list price is a strategic invitation to the market. Okay, I like that language, and I would use it in listing appointments. Price does not equal sales price. It's a positioning tool. It's a strategic positioning tool to attract interest, not a promise of value. I'm going to put strategic here. It's a strategic positioning tool to attract interest, not a promise of value. Professional tip, you may want to use extremes. If somebody wants to put that house with the tiki torches and whatever they have that's not equating to that amount of value, hey, what would happen, Beth, if we listed your $800,000 house at $5 million?
People would laugh at it and no one would come.
Beth, would that be effective to sell the house for full value?
No, it would not.
Okay. What would happen if we listed your home for sale for $100?
I think the same thing would essentially happen, is people would be like, what's that deal? That looks like a scam to me. I'm not going to bother with that.
Is it possible that you could have a ton of activity and everybody looking at it and curious to why it's priced so low? And you might have multiple, some people might think it's a scam, but some people might bid it up to and above its market value. So I just want to share with you some different strategies. I heard a couple of analogies that I didn't put in the document, but I just want to share them with you. Beth, if we decide to work together, this is a partnership. Okay. My role in the partnership is to give you advice, and your role is to make decisions based upon that advice, because you have more equity in the partnership than I do. Anybody like that?
I like that.
Right? Because in essence, right, we're investing our time, right? We're investing our money, to try to get this property sold. So we are a stakeholder. We're a partner in the outcome. We're not a partner on the deed, but we're a partner in the outcome, and we get paid part of the proceeds at sale. Okay. So I think that language builds connectivity, right? It makes them want to be part of us. And then another analogy that I heard, and it's for all of you pilots out there.
Sorry.
In this process, Beth, you're the pilot. You're making the decisions. I'm the air traffic controller, making sure that other planes don't crash into you and that the transaction goes smooth with all the other activity around. So like for me, like that's a meaningful analogy because there's just so many things that happen. You know, I've never been in air traffic control, but I can only imagine that that's a very stressful job with all the different risks and threats and other planes and whatever. So there's another kind of analogy to frame that whole relationship. I have a core belief that after studying the market, and Beth, you and I have been there where we've done it with a candidate looking to join Remax, where we've broken down markets real time in 35 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's basically three types of strategies. There's lottery or aspirational pricing, and that's where you're listing the property above the market. You are intentionally leaving room to negotiate down, right? Probably only effective in some high profile or unique cases where maybe there's only one sale every year, right? So maybe positioning it differently might have more impact if everything else takes, 200 days to sell. But 99% of our transactions, or 99.9%, this is not a viable strategy for the best outcome. The second approach is, this is what, ever since real estate's been invented, or the brokers have been invented, this is what they've all been using. We try to do, what do we do when we go to a listing appointment?
We take comps.
And what
Yeah,
CMA,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
We do a CMA, and in that CMA, Beth, we're trying to determine what the value is by making adjustments on historical sales, and comparing it to the existing home, right?
Right.
There's several defects in that whole strategy. One of the defects is very evident right now, where markets are changing. So if something sold, 5 months and 29 days ago, generally it's something that we're evaluating. And if something sold 2 days ago, it's something we're evaluating. And in many of our markets right now, there's a big distinction between something that sold nearly 6 months ago and something that sold yesterday and something that's on the market pending today. And even more so, what the competition is when you go on the market. I believe CMAs do a really poor job at normalizing all of those factors in determining, what the anticipated sale price is and backing into a strategy. We were taught to be like an appraiser, right? We were taught sound fundamentals, and we're taught not to be, emotionally connected. And we come there with a value. And then when we come there with a value, what normally happens, Beth, or anybody?
The customer tells you why his is worth more than that. Oh yeah, I know that, but I've got mobile controlled tiki torches.
A lot of sellers are stubborn and they just don't, they have a number in their head and they just don't listen. You have to try to convince them, but I
I'm
find
glad.
a lot of pushback when you start coming in with numbers.
So Ron, how does the industry taught us to convince them?
Well, we have to show them, on paper what it looks like, what the sales are, what the closed sales are, and what their competition is, because that's really where it boils down to, is competition.
So Ron, you said we have to show them. And I think, like, when we show them, they don't listen. And I'm speaking from my heart to you, because that's what our industry has taught us to do, right? What we need to do is we need to demonstrate, right? So we need to ask them questions so that it becomes obvious to them how this process works. I want everybody to listen to this last sentence. Well, I'm going to read this. So, appraised or market value is delivered from historical comparable sales and is designed to reflect what a licensed appraiser believes a property is worth based upon standardized criteria. Does that make sense for everybody? Isn't that what we normally do when we do a CMA? And I'll bet you most of us don't even do time adjustment in a CMA, which probably appraisers are going to be doing a little bit more frequently. It's a retrospective, it's looking in the rearview mirror analysis anchored in the past. Okay. If you were to hire a licensed, well, here's my way to communicate or connect the dots between that and reality. Okay, when discussing market value with the seller, it's important to distance yourself from the appraisal process and frame it objectively. When discussing market value, it's important to distance yourself from the appraisal process, frame it objectively. What I mean by that, Ron, is, hey, if you were to hire an appraiser, not my opinion, like we fall into this trap, Ron, of saying, hey, based upon the comps, it's my opinion your home is worth 700,000, right? Now, if they disagree, could that be personal? Like they're like thinking you don't think their home is worth 800,000, right? And do you think that that's an emotional, personal, perhaps even an attack on their home? Now, Ron, what if you were to distance yourself from that and say, look, hey, based upon, the procedures used to determine market value, if you were to hire an appraiser, and I'm almost like looking at them like we're partners. If we hire an appraiser, that guy or that lady over there is going to come up with this as the market value, okay? That doesn't mean it's what's going to sell for. That's the good news, but that's how they determine it, right? So if you're to look at a visual, okay, I'm sitting on the same side of the table and I'm talking about the guy or lady over here doing the market analysis or the appraisal based upon historical data and processes, right? So I'm not emotionally connected. They're not offended at me when I tell them this is what an appraiser would come back at. And if you've been on an appointment with me, you'll know that I don't get the pushback. I'm just saying this is what it would be, okay? So if you were to hire a licensed appraiser, they're required to use specific guidelines and historical data to determine the appraised value of your home. However, this figure often differs from the actual sales price, which is the true market value, because that's determined by what a ready, willing, able buyer is prepared to pay in today's market. Does that make sense? I mean, we all know that, but we don't do a great job of communicating it effectively. And this is all on that document for you, okay?
Don't we have to worry about appraised value if the likelihood is the buyer will be getting a mortgage?
Yes.
Well, this is good. This works.
But Beth, let me just tell you one thing that I found from my 37 years in the industry is if a buyer, an arm's length buyer, is willing to pay something, that influences the appraiser will find a way to make it work if he believes the contract was negotiated in the open market, right? Unless there's some ridiculous anomaly. In other words, we're going to talk here about the 10% strategic agents. They influence the market, right? We determine where the market's going, right? It's the top 10% or the top one. So as the air traffic controller of the process, Beth, you're trying to influence the appraiser by saying, hey, this was exposed to the market. We had 3 offers and this was the best offer we had. And more times than not, that property is going to appraise. And I'm going to ask you a question off the record, Beth. If you were to sell that property, what's the price for the Tiki property? Just roughly.
He thinks it's 635. I think it's 560.
Okay. So Beth, if you were to sell that house for 560, would it appraise?
Yeah.
If you sold it for 575, do you think it might appraise?
Yeah.
Right. So that little difference, right, is what I'm talking about getting the premium, right? I'm not talking about getting 800,000.
Okay.
I'm talking about getting that 575, right? Getting the full market value. And that extra 15 or 30,000 is what really makes the difference.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, good point.
So the distinction is critical. The sales price with competitive positioning determines the ultimate market value. Okay, if you have a property that's not priced right, the buyers will apply a discount when they buy it, because it's like that sandwich at Publix that they made it yesterday and now it's on discount today because it doesn't age well. A manager special. Auction or event pricing, right? Listing below market value to create urgency and the bidding momentum, right? I personally believe that intentionally pricing it slightly below the market to create extra demand will ultimately wind up in a higher sales price, right? But what I don't do is I don't say, hey, Ron, let's price it 3 to 7% below the market to create extra demand and sell your house for that highest ultimate price. I provide evidence and I ask questions. Okay. One of the most important things here, if you take this away and you just hang up for this meeting, is don't say I believe the market value of your home is X, right? Because if they don't believe that, then you have a conflict. If you say, if you hired an appraiser based upon the techniques they use, it's going to come within a percent or two of this number. And you state it like it's a fact. And, I'm looking at the people on this call, you're so qualified. This basically is a fact. You will be within 1 to 3% of what an appraiser is going to come in at, right? Here's a couple of rules here I want to share with you. And these are mindset. You can incorporate them into your listing appointment, your listing conversation. The 10%, 90% line. It's a line that divides agents into two categories, okay? You've heard of the 80-20 rule. Well, here we have the 90-10 rule. I think our business is probably going into 10%, doing more like 90% of the business than maybe 30 years ago it was 80-20. And I think technology and investment in education has allowed people to separate themselves further. Would you all agree? There's some people that are doing phenomenal numbers, having their best year ever, and there are a lot of people in that bottom 90% that are struggling. So the top percent of agents, these are the agents that influence the market through positioning, pricing psychology, and launch strategy, right? Which is you get one opportunity at a first impression. The bottom 90% are reactive agents. These agents follow the market, pick prices based on comps, and hope for offers. It's really important. Agents, aka the bottom 90, they're not leading the market, they're following the market, right? They pick prices based upon the comps, sound familiar, and they hope for offer. If that's you, maybe we want to change that slightly, right? This visual helps sellers understand you're not just listing a home. You're launching a product into a competitive market. You're not just listing a home, you're launching a product, which is their home, into a competitive market. Most agents operate in the 90%. They pick a price, they hope for the best. You can use this particular quote. Most agents operate in the 90% zone. They pick a price and hope for, and hope. I operate in the 10% where I use strategy, visuals, buyer psychology to position your home for maximum demand. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's pretty powerful. All right. Is that a nod from Cindy Reddy?
Yeah. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. That's Cindy is amazing, president of the association, and maybe I teach you something. It's a very humbling experience for me. So I put down a few little traits of it. Price pickers use comp-based pricing. They react to the market. They say, let's test the price, and they use basic CMA principles. Strategists are positioning experts. They have a launch strategy. They understand buyer psychology, and they have visual tools. Close with confidence, okay? And realize that objections are gifts. I truly, if I'm privileged with going on a listing appointment with any of you, which I freely offer, and my gift is helping you change the way you do a process. If there's no objections, I almost feel it's a shallow victory.
The Annandale wanted to know if you guys mailed out that check because my office hasn't received it.
Hold on. All right.
Check's in the mail, David.
It's a shallow victory, okay? I look forward to objections, but oftentimes they elude me, and it's crazy. Why is your price different? Okay, we need to be able to explain this. Can we test the market? What if it doesn't sell? Okay, for those of you who say you can't sell a listing you don't get, right? And you're willing to be a little bit flexible with the market, or let's even face it, let's say the market is particularly challenging, right? I would use this language and say, Cindy, are you familiar with the 10-10 rule, 10-10-0 rule as a seller? Your seller's probably going to say what?
No.
No. Fantastic. Well, I just wanted to take a moment to explain this to you, Cindy. It's a really simple rule that we use. And it says if your property's either been on the market for 10 days or has had 10 showings and has no offers, it's time to reposition it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if you set that up front, do you think that call in either 10 days or after there have been 10 showings is a lot easier?
Yeah.
And it makes all the sense in the world, right? If you had 10 showings and no offer, the thing is something's wrong with the pricing, right? The invitation is not attractive. If you've had it on the market for 10 days and you've had no showings, then you have a huge problem, right? There's not even any interest to see it. If it's 10 days, no showing, it's invisible to the market. It's overpriced. Okay. Buyers aren't even curious about it at that level. If there's 10 showings and no price, then the property is interesting, but not compelling. Buyers are intrigued, but not convinced. Okay. The market is rejecting the value proposition. What comes next is strategic repositioning. I would encourage you all to have this conversation and maybe even leave this part here as a leave behind, right? If the property's had 10 showings and no offers, it requires a 3 to 5 price adjustment to reposition it. If it's had 0 showings in 10 days, it's a little bit more significant, and we need to look at a 5 to 7% price reduction. Because what we found, Cindy, is if you have small errors in the perceived value or the pricing, okay, you will still get showings, or you'll have a lot of showings and no offers. They have different pricing levers that we've determined in the business. Okay? So this is not a discount, okay? It's repositioning. We go back to list price does not equal value, right? List price is just what? Who remembers that part? The list price is
An invitation.
Yeah,
Strategic positioning tool.
it's a strategic invitation for activity and offers. Okay? So when you reposition it, it's not a discount, it's a repositioning. A repositioning is a repositioning. The goal is to reignite urgency and not to chase the market. Okay. And I can do a whole nother mastermind on the days on market inflection points, because that's not a theory, that's a fact, right? You can look at every market, and unless there's, anomalies, and the only anomaly I normally see is like a property that's being flipped or a new construction home that's not done. When it's finished and you can walk in and see it, then it might sell after being on the market for 200 days, maybe even at a premium. Refresh the presentation, update the photo. We've had 10 showings. This is a script. We have had 10 showings and no offers. That's not a failure, it's feedback. The market is telling us we're close, but not compelling. A modest repositioning, whatever the category, whether it's no showings or no offers, 3 to 5 can shift perception, stir urgency, and invite action. Right? And you can borrow these words, and it's really simple. And I think what it does is it conveys what we know in our heart, but we don't have the communication strategy to effectively communicate that. And then if you nail the listing appointment, if you nail the conversation, price is just the natural next step, and there's very little friction. When you've educated them, you're on the same page, right? Visually, I'm sitting on the same side of the table saying, hey, we decided to work together. We're partners in this, right? You have more equity, you make the decisions, but we're partners, right? I like that analogy. And even if I don't use it, if I don't find a way to make those words my own, having that psychology has me behave differently. Does that make sense? Greenacre, what do you think? You've been doing this a really, really long time.
Oh, come on, I'm not that old.
That was a compliment, Gary.
Yes,
you are.
No, I definitely agree with it. And you got to go in with the confidence of it. I've used different than the 10 days I've done. If you haven't had 10 showings in 30 days, analogy on that, but it definitely works.
Wait, let me ask you, Gary. I mean, maybe from, you and I have been in the business for a long time. I wear it as a badge of honor. I'm not being.
Oh, no, I'm just joking
right.
with you.
So maybe 15 years ago, 30 days would have been the appropriate number. But now when buyers are watching days on market, it's too long.
Yep.
It literally is too long to reposition it. So maybe we can change the script, even if you've been in the business for more than 20 years, like Gary and I, right? It's a different way of having that communication strategy. I believe that like one of the most frustrating things is to have the knowledge, right? And to be the best possible person to help launch that property, but not be able to get the homeowners to see it, right? And getting the homeowners to see it is what today's all about. It's giving you the communication strategy, not to be offensive, not to take overpriced listings, but to effectively get the buy-in for a homeowner to make the right decision for the partnership, which is us and them, to get the best outcome possible, right? This is equal. First, if you don't buy into and you don't believe what I'm telling you about the days on market effect and the different strategies, you need to study the market, because if you're not 100% bought in, you will never be able to convince anybody to do something different, right? Because they're always going to come back and say, I want to try this price. And mindset, okay, your mindset really matters. It's like the silent hand that's at the meeting, right? I wish, you know, Joe Garcia was here. It's like reading the room, right? It's like knowing when the time is to say, hey, you have that extra key. And then you know that it's just the natural next step. Okay. And then lastly is we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We can borrow, you know, words and scripts that have been perfected by, you know, people over the years. And I think a lot of what I have is probably stuff I heard in podcasts and talking to other people and networking, right? And then it just all kind of comes together for me to be able to be highly confident going on any listing appointment anywhere with one of you who knows the market intimately. And then I have the maybe one step ahead of the communication channel, the vision of how to demonstrate to somebody what the right activity is. Right? Is anybody going to take any of this and make a significant change in what you're doing, or you give me some feedback, give me some pushback?
Well, Rob, I've already, I mean, just from having that 10-10-10-0, I've already, and I circled that as that's going to get changed in my script. So from the 30 days that I've used before. So it definitely see the advantage of this.
Yeah. And then, you know, the consumer will remember when you mention that. You say, hey, you know, I don't know if this is going to be necessary, but if it is, you know, you'll remember that we're not going to be reactionary. We're going to be proactive to attack the market and get maximum demand.
You know, Rob, if I can jump in, you know, I think it's excellent, and I think it's a system every agent should use, and they should use it on every listing they take. Give it to let the seller know about it up front. I think that keeps the seller involved in what you're doing and understanding it better. Most of the time, when you're in a market like we're in right now in Dallas or North Dallas, prices are even coming down. So every month, every week, you're seeing reductions. And this is a great system to have to be able to follow.
You know, from my experience with, you know, most of you on the call, I know that you really care about your clients, right? Many of you are become friends. It's almost like they're extended family. Is that true?
Yes.
Right. And I don't know one person on this call that would intentionally mislead a client just to try to get something signed to do business. So what I'm trying to express is that there is a solution where, you know, you don't have to feel like you're pressured to do something that's against your fundamental, your foundational interest, and you can still wind up with a better outcome, right? And then, you know, making the process easier produces abundant referrals and more business back because they feel that you care about them enough that you're not going to mislead them, right? So I'd rather walk away than start a relationship on, I'll call it a lie or a stretching of the truth, whatever you want to call it, right? And the reason why some people do that is because they're like, oh, when I was taught you can't do a price reduction on a listing that you don't have. Right now, especially for some of the newer agents, you're going to be experiencing expired listings if you don't embrace this, right? And you know what your return on investment is for an expired listing?
Mine.
Right. You lose time, and I'll bet it even takes a little bit of time off your lifespan, right? Because when you get those calls from those people that are aggressive that their house hasn't sold, right? You're like looking at the phone and like, oh, Beth, I don't want to take that call. It's Bill again. He's not happy. His house isn't sold.
Hey, Rob, if I may too, this is Alina. I think also in some markets that are super competitive, the 10-10-0 rule could be even tweaked a little. If you're in a very competitive condo market and you know that they in the market are just out there, maybe it's a 10-5-0 rule. You know, I would be super happy if I got 5 showings in 10 days. So I may not wait for 10 showings to have the conversation with my seller.
Okay. I mean, I think, you know, I agree in the principle that, you know, all the markets are different, but I think as an expectation to say across the board that everybody gets the same message.
Right.
Right. And I don't know that extra few days is that critical. But I do acknowledge that, you know, condo market is particularly challenge, a lot of headwinds.
So Rob, I wanted to mention something from a slightly different perspective with regard to this in terms of pricing and the perception in the marketplace by your peers, by other agents. If they come to recognize an agent that tends to overprice their listings, that's going to negatively impact that agent's listings going forward. Long before I knew that we called it, auction pricing, I was doing that type of pricing in my marketplace. One time, just one time, I agreed to let a seller bump my price up from where I thought, according to all of my research, it should have been. And we did it. And I told them up front, what the possible problems might be. And I have to tell you, it didn't take a day before I started getting calls from agents in my area saying, "Hey, Robert, how did you come up with that price? I mean, your prices are always so like on the money, and this one is just like out of control wrong." And I told myself that day that I was never going to do that again, and I didn't. So perception by other agents helps you whether you realize it or not.
Yep. It also helps when you got yourself fully convinced that it's the right thing to do.
Right.
It makes it so much easier for us to be, easily empowered to hold the line on that type of a conversation. So what's some of the challenges that you have? And I'm going to take it from just getting the listing, from getting a listing where you're paid properly and it's positioned correctly.
I'd like to hear how other people handle the buyer compensation conversation.
I think most people nowadays know. I mean, most sellers know how it works.
They do not. I mean,
No.
maybe
No,
in
they
your
do
market
not.
they do, but in my market they do not.
Yeah, I
Even
don't,
in our
They really
market,
don't
they do
understand.
not.
Yeah.
I don't get too much pushback from sellers when they want to list a property and offer 2.5 or 3% or whatever to a buyer's broker. I mean, there's sometimes you get just got to explain to them, that's the way you're going to get your house shown more and get more possibilities of getting a good price by having other agents cooperate.
I
Hey,
always
Rob.
address it as assuming that I tell the seller straight out, it's another closing cost. If they're asking for closing cost concessions, whether it's compensation, their closing costs, lender fees, it's all bottled into one, thing. And what they need is where we're trying to work through. It doesn't mean we have to agree to it. We can make adjustments to it. But when a buyer comes in and says, I need X dollars and all of these terms, they may
What's
need
new in
that.
your world?
We can adjust, but there we are.
Really? Where'd you go?
I don't
Oh,
even
good.
say anything. I would just say my commission is X. And out of X, I give it out Y to the buyer's agent. And that's it. I don't even want to go into details. I just said there are a lot of NAR rules have changed. In order to expose your home to a lot of buyers, this is a strategy I use.
Yeah, but the problem is that they're always going to tell you, these sellers are going to say, oh, but I heard that now we don't have to pay the buyer's agent anymore.
When
Well, they
that's
didn't have
on,
to
when
10
that
years ago
question
either.
comes up, then I dig into it. If that question doesn't come up, I don't, because I have been so many listing presentations since NAR has happened. Going that route, answering that question beforehand is like digging myself in a hole and I cannot come back.
So what do you say to them when they tell you that?
The
I
consensus
just
is in.
say, yeah,
So
I just
in
be
my
very
experience with
transparent.
myself and other agents, because I get a lot of calls from my former agents, the consensus is in. And to the point where a good amount of buyers agents calling in asking for that compensation, as soon as they hear that there is no compensation being offered, they apologize and they say, my buyer will not allow me to show them anything that is not offering compensation. Because the buyer is now scared that they're going to be stuck with a bill. That, at least in the listing that I just put up, helped me get over that hurdle. I told them, buyers agents right now are not only asking for themselves, but they're getting instructions from the buyers themselves that if no compensation is being offered, they'd rather look at something else.
But everything is negotiable. They can put it in the
It's
offer.
still negotiable.
Right.
Well,
That's the thing.
Can't
Everything
you
is still negotiable.
but
Yeah.
he's
Here's
also
the thing,
not-
everything is in the MLS contract. The bottom line is everything is in the MLS contract. It says as a owner of the house, you do know that if you're not given, you are entitled to or eligible to whatever that word is, not give compensation to the buyer's agent, and this might reduce your exposure. It's already written in the MLS document. So why even bother going into so deep? Everything is negotiable, this and that. Just put it, hey, it's in the MLS agreement. Let me know if you want to go forward with this route or not. And if you do not want to go with this route, these are the consequences you will face. But once you realize the consequences after putting your feet into water, we can come back and adjust it.
I
I
think
just
we
don't
do,
want to go there
we
deep
still
into
have
it.
we have a duty to not just and I appreciate that, but we have a duty to explain. I think that's part of the reason is that sellers feel like have felt that we are not being transparent or that, you know, so I do think there's a middle ground where we can do our duty to explain and not just leave it to their interpretation and understanding.
This is for both you, Kenya and Rupa. I think that there's definitely grounds for different approaches.
Sure.
In my opinion, I like what I call the illusion of choice.
Right.
And the way that would play into this circumstance, Rupa, in my opinion, I'm not saying that this is an absolute, but I would say, hey, Rupa, you know, when we put your house on the market, you know, we need to decide if and how much we're going to compensate an agent that brings us the buyer. And then I wait. And you know what? Every time happens when I'm out on that appointment with you, they say, what do you recommend? Right. And then I'm prepared with an answer saying that you look at what I've found is sometimes buyers might be hesitant to make an offer if they have to pay the commission external. As a seller, it's built into the price. So if I were selling, I would put it out at 2.5. Rarely would I do 3, but that's what I'd say. Okay. And then say, okay, we'll do that 2.5. And then I say, okay, my fee is 3. And we just move on as if it's a natural course of action. Okay. And if you've been out with me, maybe 1 out of 25 say, oh, but why are you charging 3, you know, or whatever you charge. But it's almost like it doesn't even come into play. Right?
Yeah.
Because I've already
Agreed.
demonstrated value.
Can we also just go back to the thing in terms of, I don't know who said it, but it was with respect to buyers who don't want to see properties. And I get that that's how many agents position it. But I know that for me, when I'm working with buyers, I feel I have a responsibility to show them anything and everything. And I have this conversation up front that fits their criteria because we can always ask. I'm telling you, at least 3 times this year, they said no compensation. We put together a compelling offer that had compensation in it and we got it. So I feel
Yeah,
I
but maybe
agree
that
with
was
that too.
understood. It's
Well,
not that
well,
the
something-
agent refused to
something
show it.
we're-
It's
No,
the
I get it.
buyer refused to see it.
Well,
So
I-
with that,
hold on.
with that
So-
particular case, I spoke to that agent multiple times, trying to do just that. Hey, come on in. You can see it. We know that it's going to be negotiable. Even, you know, we can talk about it.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with what you're saying to sort of get sellers to understand that. But I was just saying, I just was thinking about how we're dealing with our buyers and not necessarily being that agent who won't show because of the compensation.
So you can, first of all, congratulations on overcoming that. And for me, my conversation would be like, hey, I know that there's an urge to resist properties where there's no compensation. However, what I've found is that limits the marketability of that property, and we're often able to get a better deal. And in my last 3 transactions, I was able to negotiate the compensation in the contract. So I would take whoever was saying, my client says I don't want to see ones without it, I would spin that and say this is a positive because there are some agents that are not going to show it. There are some buyers that aren't going to look at it. So that means that the market's going to have limited exposure, and that can be an advantage for us.
Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even ask anymore what they're offering. I just want to know, is it from seller or from broker to broker or seller to broker? And they say, oh, it's broker to broker. We're offering to. I say, sorry, but you don't determine my compensation. I'll put it in the offer, and I'm getting 3%. So.
Well,
Same.
I agree. In the beginning, I called and asked if they were offering compensation, and I did that for about a month, and then I stopped %.
Yeah, I don't know. This recent transaction I have under contract, the buyer's agent called. he said, is your seller offering compensation? I said, yes, just put it in the offer. I didn't, it was like almost one sentence. Yes, just put it in the offer. So what was interesting about that is he assumed that the seller was going to pay 3%. He never asked how much. But the seller, and he thought, well, if they negotiated a particular price, he had actually made a deal with his seller to just write up the contract, and he only wanted $1,000, which is stupid, but that's a whole different story.
I mean,
And he put it in the offer at $1,000, and we countered, and he goes, well, because it's saving you 3% less $1,000, you're saving the seller. And I go, you asked if they were selling compensation or offering compensation. I told you just put it in the contract. You did. You only asked for $1,000. That has nothing to do with our counter offer. And he goes, well, it's saving the seller 3%. And I said, well, I'll just be upfront with you. The seller was never offering 3%. That was your assumption. So your seller and you as a listing agent should never, ever, ever tell the agent how much your seller is willing to pay.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Period. Yeah, I agree with that too.
And
So-
some of the agreements make it difficult the way the listing agreements are written, you know what I mean, to make that happen. But I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it's all about what the seller nets at the end of the day, not about how much somebody's offering or what you're offering. It's, how do we put it together?
Right, and you can, yeah, and Beth, I think that this is something that is also part of the conversation that you have with your clients, right? This goes back to, what I would cover for an agent that was on vacation or out on medical, I would be playing real estate agent, right? And I would have multiple offers, and some sellers would be like, okay, well, don't tell anybody because I don't want to have, people not looking at the property. Others would say, yes, let them know we have offers so that they're more competitive. And that would be a conversation I would have with a seller that I adopted because I'm covering for an agent. And I would also let the agent know how I would prefer to handle it. But I think transparency is good. If I were in the business of listing like all of you, I would probably say, look, Beth, we're gonna, if somebody asks if we're offering compensation, I'd like to have permission to say yes. Please request it in your contract, right? And you'll have some people that request $1,000 because that's all they're worth. Some people that will ask for more, and then you can say, my seller is counter offering with 2.5%. So I happen to be a big fan of telling the cooperative agent that, hey, you know what? Put your compensation request in. My seller is reasonable and is prepared to consider paying compensation, right? And I don't think you're going to lose any deals with that strategy, right? As a fiduciary to your seller, you might have that person that's willing to put it in for $1,000, okay? And I'm going to share with everybody another scenario that that happened this week. One of our agents had a client, or not a client, I won't call it a client. One of our agents had a relationship with somebody that they'd worked with in the past. They went and they saw an open house, okay, and they made a verbal offer to the listing agent, who basically said that's not going to work and didn't follow up with them. Manager comes to me and says, hey, Rob, how do we handle this? And, I said, personally, I'd be transparent and be willing to pay a referral fee or a fee to, I said a referral fee, and my manager actually did a better job than me. She called the agent and said, hey, my agent has somebody that saw a property and even made a verbal offer to you. They want to work through my agent. If we put this together, would it be reasonable to give you $1,000 for your efforts in showing the property? Like, well, that's great. And now when that offer goes in and they see that person's name who they talked to in the past, they're not going to be pissed off saying, why did this client go around me, right? We turned a negative into a positive. And because of the collaboration, like I said, pay a 20% referral fee on a $900,000 sale. My manager was smarter than me and said, why don't we just offer them $1,000 and see if they take it? And she's like, well, they were thrilled for the $1,000. So now our agent is putting together a contract for $900,000 even, making full commission, never showing the house, paying the other agent $1,000 for showing. Like, that's like the convergence of great ideas coming together. A, the agent asking the question, be the manager coming to me, seeing the manager having a better idea than me, and that's how the agent wins, right? So it's all about communication. And my belief is, the illusion of choice is, hey, when the property is launched and another agent calls me, how are we going to have that conversation about compensation? I would say, let's be prepared to pay 2.5%. But when they call me, can I have permission to say we'll consider all offers and offers of compensation. Please just put it in writing. And I'd even say my seller is very reasonable and prepared to compensate, but I wouldn't put the number out. That's me, right? And when I sign up that listing at 3.5%, 2.5%, whatever your number is, it also sounds to be a little bit less intimidating. I'm not hiding. I'm not like pulling a card and putting it under the table without sharing. I'm like, look, here's what we're going to do. And somebody was it Beth? You said somebody just wanted $1,000 for preparing the contract. So now you all have a story, right? You said we offer compensation. You put it in writing. Somebody came in with $1,000 offer of compensation. What was the sale price, Beth?
600,000.
Think of how much money you save the seller by not saying I'm paying 2 or 3%.
Yep.
This is what I believe would be a good idea, but I want to get somebody. Does anybody vehemently disagree with that?
Well, the only thing I'll disagree with, and I know because of the chats going on, so like in Florida, because and I know state laws are a little bit different in Florida because the way our listings are written, we primarily operate as transactional agents. The key phrase that they always use at the state level is you cannot do anything at the detriment of another. So if your listing agreement is a broker to broker and it says you're authorized to offer, unless you have a compelling reason in the state, there's a video out there that says maybe multiple offers where they may change the way that structure is. And again, that's very, very rare. We basically have an obligation to offer the amount that's in there in a truthful manner. Single agent may be a little different. And then if it's seller to broker, seller to broker, maybe, but that's my only disagreement.
Is there any room to put like up to, I know I do an addendum on mine because I do feel like when you're saying you're offering 3 or you're offering 2, that sounds like a mandate, which is exactly what the law is meant to discourage. Again, that takes away the negotiability, right? I'm just curious.
So in Arizona, our listing agreement does not have a dollar or a percentage in there. It simply says that the seller is willing to provide compensation, that it's negotiable. So we do put in the listing what our fees are, and if there's an unrepresented buyer, what those fees would be, but we don't have anything in there to address that so that there is the flexibility of the negotiation of the commission.
I like that. And I've also seen, and I know we're running up against time, but I've also seen a practice by some listing agents, which I don't agree with, is that, you put your 5%, your 6%, and then if you don't end up, if somebody either doesn't request compensation, buyer broker doesn't request compensation, and or they keep the whole thing. Like for me, I pass that savings along to my seller, right? And so I put all that in an addendum. So, but I have seen that a number of times when the Alta comes out there, listing agent took 5%. My buyer paid me because they want to be competitive and not put it in a request, and the listing agent took it all. So
it is interesting. It's different in every state, how the listing agreements are written. So
I just wanted to point that out. It's probably the only disagreement I had is because Florida versus Arizona versus New Jersey, where we have a little bit different laws. So
right.
This is also a great time to set the tone for the entire transaction. This is usually your first interaction with the other agent on the other side. So the conversation really needs to be an upbeat one of if it's negotiable, if it's nope, it's 3%, no, it's 2%, no, it's whatever it is. This is your time to show your value to the other agent on the other side and set the entire tone for how this transaction is going to go. When an agent calls me and asks me about it, because in Arizona we do have the fiduciary duty not to just come out and say, oh, it's 3%. And we tell them to put it in the offer. That's my time to say, hey, you know what? I'm really looking forward to working with you on this deal. We are open to compensation. Go ahead and put it in your offer. Really excited to make this thing come together.
Occasionally, you will get the agent who will say, I'm not showing the property until you tell me what compensation the seller is offering.
Hey, we're not showing the property until you tell us what you want in the offer. No problem. That's great. I really like opening up the books when you're not willing to negotiate with me. This is a business transaction, right? Let's make it fun. Let's make it exciting. If you're buying my business, I'm not opening the books to you. Write me a letter of intent. Come on,
I've
let's look
actually
up each
had
other's skirts at the same time.
Well, and the phrase I always use when people ask me, and I always say, like, show the property. If you're going to write an offer, let's talk about the terms. And they ask, is there an offer? And I always do this. I send a text right before I write the offer, and I ask 6 questions. And so, is there a title company for the property? Is there an offer and compensation? If so, how much? Is it broker to broker or seller to broker? Are the disclosures on blah, 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 blah? And people ask me on my listings, and I always use the phrase, there is an offering of X subject to the totality of the offer. In other words, we're not going to sign it ahead of time. Just send it in with your offer. And if you write a really ridiculous offer, the seller has every ability to negotiate that in other terms.
I called one the other day and I said, you know what? I have a goal in mind. I'm showing your property today. He's really excited about it. My goal is that we're going to get this under contract. When I write that, I'm going to go ahead and give you a phone call. I'm looking for 3% because that's what my value is and what I'm going to bring to the table. And what I'm going to also bring to the table for your sellers is I'm going to make sure that when we go under contract, we're not going to nitpick you in the inspection period. I'm going to counsel my client to make sure that this is a smooth transaction and that we get to the closing table with the least amount of stress for you. And hey, that's what 3% comes with the offer.
And honestly, like in our market, averaging, I mean, like I hate to use that word, but commonly you would see a 2.5% offering. I always charge 3%. 99% of the time, we're writing it in the closing cost concessions, seller to contribute $15,000 toward closing cost prepaids, escrow, and any fee associated with the closing of this transaction. It is a professional fee, and so the lender will strip off the commission first, use the rest of the money for everything else. And so we do that. I think probably 19 out of 20 offers we're writing right now, that's exactly how we structure them. Whatever the difference is, I'm not going to get into it with the broker. You're offering that, I'm going to take that, and I'm asking the seller to pay the rest.
Let's be honest, the only way you do this is you communicate. That's how you win.
Yeah, exactly.
And for everybody here, here's an open invitation. Like when I'm in your neighborhood, and unfortunately, Jason, that's not often in Pace, but I'll have to
come on
coordinate
out. The beach is great this time of year.
I will test my hypothesis. I'd love to go on appointments with you on ones that are not layups, but bring me on one that's a bona fide seller, but one that's going to put you through the ringer, and let's see if it works. Because the collective, not if we had like the best of the best skill sets of everybody on this call, like we would be like there's no question that you'd be the #1 agent in the world, because the collective talent here is just unmatchable. And if I learn something with you, Jason, with Wilson, with Lisa Malservisi, with everybody, and then we take it and we share it, like we're helping the customer, and in return that helps us to build our brand and our business.
Hey, I took a friend of mine out. She came out here with her family, and I had like a couple of condos on the beach, and she watched my process to the buyer. And we, on the ride out back to the beach, about an hour, like I asked her, I said, hey, tell me what you think. She goes, well, you don't mind? I said, no, I only learned by other people watching. And then she learned something by something I said to the buyer in that process. So I agree with you. I'd love for you to come. You can never stop learning.
And Jason, here's another thing that I'm going to put out there for everybody, right? Because, there's that 90-10 rule, right? Where, and I got to be honest, like a lot of the 10% is on this call, right? The 90% that should be here are probably not, right? But what I would say is offer to help, listen to me, offer to help somebody in your office that's struggling and say, hey, if you have a listing coming up, I'll take, I'd love to go out there with you. I'll take a 30% referral. I'll split it with you, and I'll walk you through how I handle it. So half of a pie is worth more than all of no pie, right? Plus, if somebody's new in the business, to work a transaction with any of you on this call, like with you, Jason, if they were working it with you, like they would get an education, right? You'd get half of a commission, which would be fair. I think we're all in this business because we like to help people. So you'd be able to help somebody. And when that person is then, doing Platinum Club, you'd be like, hey, I helped, Mary Jane or Paul Lewis to become a Platinum agent. You feel good about it. And when you do it with somebody else, Jason, you enhance your skills. So like if I went out with you, I would be a lot more intentional and deliberate than if I did one on my own. Just human nature.
Sure.
So
And
look for,
I think everybody in my office know, because I love to teach. Come in my office. If you need some help, I'll help you if what I can. And the only thing I ask is if I'm giving you some strategies, go do them. Don't waste my time telling me I don't want to do that. If you're asking me, just embrace it, try it, tweak it, go from there. But I love doing it. It's why I love teaching, as you've heard on these calls, like stuff I love to teach and stuff I'm good at teaching. So
You're very good at teaching, Jason.
This is
Thank you, Tricia.
This obviously was a very emotional topic for everybody. It caused us to go overtime here, but I hope everybody got one or two takeaways, and have a productive, great, awesome weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You
Rob.
too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Rob, can we
Thanks,
have the
everybody
notes,
else.
please? Can we have the script?
Yeah, hold on. So it's in the email. I'll just show you again.
Okay.
So here, you can get this from going to the BombBomb that you got, and right over here, there's bulletproof custom. That's a link to click on it, and it opens it up.
Oh,
Thank you. Yes?
Thank
Send it-
you. Great
if you-
session, Rob.
Lisa, after you get it, send it to me.
Okay.
Bye.
And if anybody has trouble, reach out to your manager or me. I'll get it over to you directly. Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Have a great weekend.
Consider
Bye.
me having trouble.